My name is Garett Meznarich. I'm the director for our Marketo practice over at Perficient. So we're actually part of the greater Adobe business unit. Been with Perficient for about 3 years now and been in the MarTech space for about 8. So really excited, love all things Adobe, all things Marketo, and just really engaged and excited to be talking to, again, these two wonderful co-hosts that are going to be joining me today. I'll actually turn it over to Kalie to have her give herself a deeper introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Hi, everybody. I'm Kalie Nitzsche. I'm based out of Chicago, Illinois. I am currently the sales manager for customer journey management at Adobe. And essentially, that's just a very fancy way of saying that I have 3 main experienced or customer journey products underneath me: Adobe Campaign, Marketo, and then Adobe Journey Optimizer. I have been with Adobe for this going into my 4th year. Started out as really just a Marketo specialist and have opened my bag to have those additional products as well. I'm currently in our strategic healthcare vertical. So that means that I work with our largest payers, providers, and then also pharma customers. So today's presentation from my perspective will be very healthcare focused, but I do have years of experience in ad tech where I worked with some of the largest CPG, retail, travel brands. So, able to tap into that for today's discussion.
Thanks, Kalie. Yeah, and that's what I'm really excited to, is we're going to get some unique perspectives about very different industries. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Brandon Ratliff to give himself an introduction to the rest of us.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. I'm Brandon Ratliff from Qualcomm. I lead up our digital marketing operations. I've been in that role for quite a long time. Played in this space I've been at Qualcomm for 17 years. I've played in MarTech for 20 plus the beginning. So I've seen the evolution, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with Kalie and Garrett. And without further ado, Garrett, take it away.
Great, thanks, Brandon. Well, so before we dive into our meat of the conversation, Brandon's part of the Qualcomm team. So for everybody who hasn't heard of Qualcomm, the phone that you have in your hand, some of the tech items you have probably has a Qualcomm chip in it. They're a multinational corporation, really driving around wireless technology, just best-in-class engineering around all things microchip, smartphones, laptops, and now the Internet of Things. So your refrigerator, your car, and everything else that you can imagine. Chip in it, there's probably a Qualcomm chip in there. But Qualcomm really is the leading cutting edge on that, really driving in the 5G network as well. And it's really fun to be engaged with Brandon here, to see such a cutting edge industry and client and company to be able to work together. So with that, Brandon, I wanted to talk a little bit more around digital transformation. We hear digital transformation, buzzword, bingo, want to insert marketing buzzword of the day. But you mentioned in your bio, you've been in MarTech for 20 years, and just seen a lot of transformation, probably seen it all, right? And so we're going to deep dive obviously into the Marketo side of things. But as you, from a marketing practitioner and really expanding your knowledge, I'm curious, what sort of transformations have you seen and changes within, your company throughout kind of the tenure that you've been with Qualcomm?
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I think, there's a summary of it, but what I've seen is, we've gone from, these siloed operations to more global operations. And transformation, yeah, it is a buzzword bingo about digital transformation. But the key here is that we're breaking down the siloed walls and the partnering across lines, across engineering, product management, sales ops, paid media. These things are starting to get lower and lower. And it's through the MarTech that this is happening, and that we can scale at speed once we get alignment. And so the other tipping point, the summary of it is that in our team, this function has really transformed itself. It used to be, you just do automation or email or some channel specific thing, and it's moved into digital marketing operations, and that's transitioned to revenue operations. And a lot of organizations will use that kind of buzzword revenue operations, but it's true. You're now partnering with folks like sales development reps and business development reps and sales ops and sales themselves. And so it becomes mutually beneficial to the entire organization that these walls are lowered. So digital transformation is just a natural evolution of marketing technologies.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to think about that from that perspective of that big picture digital transformation, like you mentioned, and start thinking about how you take that initial step. So, Brandon, I'm interested in your perspective, especially when we think about it as practitioners. We sometimes, really find ourselves caught in this analysis paralysis where there's so much to do. There's so much, coming at you at 100 miles an hour, left and right and up and down and everything in between. Especially when we think about like Marketo and the different products that you're in charge of. How do you find, or how do you see yourself prioritizing, taking that first step? And and what is your process and thought process around that?
That's a great question, Garrett. And to be honest, it depends, and a lot depends on where you're at and what your company's set up. And ours, it started with a funny story, but before I get there, I think the best thing you can do is just start partnering around the organization and rack and stack the work as much as you possibly can. And then you align it towards some sort of value extraction. How are we getting the value out of this? Is it, some sort of KPI or whatnot? But when we first started this, a dear friend, a former partner at another agency, we transitioned off of one piece of tech and we were on to Marketo, and it sort of changed our world, looking at the whole, opportunity here. And he was going through like, hey, is this, are we walking? Are we crawling? Are we running? Is this the Olympics? And I was like, no, dude, we're way before all that. We're like baby rolling over. And he's like, great, I'll acronym it, BRO. And I was like, oh, of course, we're going to call it BRO. And that was the beginning. And just like anything, any problem you ever face, it's like, just take the first step, and everything else is partnerships and the next step, and communication, and take the next step. And so we've gone on this journey, and we've gone from that baby rolling over to now we're walking, and in some cases we're running, and we're running at a high clip. And that, will introduce new challenges, but it's all in an effort to know. It's going from the I think to the I know. And it started with a funny little acronym that, my friend Andrew at an agency brought up. That was the beginning kind of seed of all this, but it was a lot of fun to go through the journey thus far. And that was only within the last 5 or 6 years. So, we've only scratched the surface, at least from my perspective of being Qualcomm here for 17 years. It's moving fast, and it's doing good things to, create unity and lower some of those walls, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and like you said, it's gathering that knowledge and being able to build upon that. So it's great insight to hear, that perspective from your side, and also not being shy about bringing in other teams and really collaborating and taking that from a collaborative point of view, and really trying to eliminate those silos. Kalie, I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about it from the Adobe lens, and talking about starting here, and if we use Brandon's analogy for baby rolling over, where do you see the clients that you're working with, the different companies that are leveraging the Adobe suite? Where are they at, and how would you identify that process where they're in, from this bro to know, if we stick with this analogy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because first of all, I love this analogy. Our industry just lives in these crawl, walk, runs, and we keep saying these, buzzwords and buzz phrases, if you will. This resonates a little bit more with me. And I'll, specifically to your question, Garrett, at Adobe, we see customers on the entire maturity curve. So we have, if we're taking Brandon's example here, even customers in their newborn stage, right? They don't even know how to roll over yet. And they're just laying there on their backs, kind of just floundering, wondering, where do we start? Do we need to look at data consolidation? What are we doing with our digital marketing automation strategy? And then we have customers that are doing really, really complex, customer journey management, where they're administering several, thousands or millions of different journeys in less than an hour on a personalized event. So from an Adobe perspective, really kind of an end-to-end. Specifically in healthcare, healthcare has always been a laggard in terms of, compared to other industries. So I'm really helping a lot of these major healthcare customers get to kind of where we are from a modern age in digital transformation. So getting them a strategy around their data, getting them a strategy around how we're going to do this from a governance perspective. How are we going to start doing lifecycle management journeys through your customer base and really driving account-based marketing activities, and start to garner really those ROI or success metrics that we're wanting to see from their campaigns. So from an Adobe side, really kind of an end-to-end, travel, retail, CPG at the forefront from a modernization perspective. And then I'm trying to get healthcare up to some of those larger customers on that side.
I love that perspective, Kalie, and it's really interesting. And obviously, as you mentioned, the healthcare industry can tend to be, coming up to speed, with comparison to see, where Brandon and the Qualcomm side is on a different industry. So it's really fascinating to look at those perspectives, and again, really appreciate the insight there.
Yeah, and I think also, Garrett, it's worth calling out from a healthcare perspective, there's a lot of red tape, just like within government, right? I mean, we're dealing with HIPAA concerns and some of the things that other industries don't necessarily have to worry about. So taking that into consideration and then coupling that with, their digital transformation initiatives tends to be very challenging, but also leads to extreme success once we can get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, especially with the red tape. And, I think that segues nicely into our next portion of this conversation, where we wanted to talk about the building systems for B2B and B2C. I think this, is definitely in the forefront on the healthcare side of things, as well as, Brandon and their initiatives at Qualcomm, because there are a lot of considerations. And I think, the mindset, historically speaking, was you were a B2B marketer or you were a B2C marketer. And there was clear distinctions between those two. And, I'm always interested in hearing perspectives, especially from you two, around how that is blending now, especially with all these different technologies and customer expectations and end-to-end, client expectations, and also end-to-end, users, and all those different things. Things are evolving, things are moving quickly. That whole different level set of expectations from the end user has so rapidly and exponentially changed. I'm really interested in kind of understanding, we'll start with Brandon, how you're starting to tackle, blending the B2B to B2C and start to tackle and take that first bite into the B2C group, as Qualcomm, as a marketing practitioner.
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective to talk about. We've always traditionally put both of these approaches into two different buckets. But I think as the technology is, gotten better, the real-time journey optimization is there. Those type of capabilities exist. That difference between a B2C buyer and a B2B buyer is getting smaller and smaller, and the expectation is getting smaller and smaller. And I think that's the kernel of everything that's in digital transformation. And for us, it's an opportunity. And so we use that opportunity, again, to partner with our various parts of our marketing team to unveil something we called Snapdragon Insiders, which was a great way for us to put on our B2C hats and go to work, and drive that into a new space that we traditionally haven't done, because we much rather play in the B2B world because we're selling to other companies. We're not selling to, end users. But this is an opportunity to build a community and build some brand preference and build some partnerships with some of our customers to show that, how we innovate with wireless technologies. Garrett, you mentioned a bunch of them up front. I won't repeat them, but things like 5G and IoT in the automobile and things like that. But it also, that flowed into our approach to give our teams the ability to establish that community and grow and start to create brand preference and start to create better digital journeys or digital experiences that mimic what you see in the wild today for traditionally B2C companies. We all engage with those probably every day, but you're not going to probably engage with us every day because we're selling to the customers with the products that you're buying, at least in the mobile phones and your Wi-Fi routers and things of that nature. But in doing so, it really allowed us to engage an always-on approach, because when you get to B2C, you have to have just seamless transitions. You have to be able to act on data very quickly, or you at least have to be ready for that data to show up in your systems and act accordingly.
So it's interesting, Brandon, you talk about that always on approach in particular when you're looking at, expanding. I'm curious, as you look and, you're starting to grow in that B2C side of the business, obviously that comes with that database growth and seeing a huge volume and uptick in the size of your actual lead database that you're trying to service, you're trying to put up front. So when you're thinking about that exponential potential growth within your database, how are you planning accordingly to make sure that you're maintaining that data, cleaning that data, and working with the teams, around you from an analytics perspective to make sure that, you're getting the data, which is great, but it's also the appropriate data and you're taking the action that's needed on it?
Yeah, and it's constant communication. It's having your thumb on the pulse of things that are happening. So when surges happen, which is traditional in B2C, you see surges based on all sorts of things, word of mouth, some sort of large paid campaign, and it's always being connected. And that's the other benefit of going B2C and then, firing up our regions and, reestablishing or recommunicating with our regions around the world about what they're doing, because every region is going to have a different approach. It's, culturally relevant to them, or, it's something that they see as an interest category that maybe isn't what we traditionally see here in San Diego or North America, or, the United States. And so it's really fun to go along for the ride. It's a lot of work, but at the same time, it builds this partnership that everybody's on the same ship. But it's key for us to understand what that growth rate is. And that's my job, is to make sure that, we've got enough seats on the boat for everybody that we're going to pick up, and that we're doing right by them, because the B2B buyer is a B2C buyer. And so the better that we create that overall experience for that B2C brand engagement, where we built a Snapdragon Insiders phone, and we unveiled all the latest and greatest technologies and features and capabilities, we have to transition that into a very good B2B buying experience, because maybe that person is a device engineer at one of our customers. And so the two go hand in hand. And it's the health of our database is paramount to all of that working seamlessly.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, as much as we, really want to focus on our marketing activities, the data behind that is so essential to the success of all of our campaigns, all of the big initiatives that we're doing. To that question, Kalie, I'm really interested to see, from your perspective on the Adobe side of things, what you've seen as, companies are taking that journey and transitioning, B2B, B2C, kind of melding them in between, with leveraging the Adobe stack as an opportunity. What sort of solutions have played a role in those sort of successes for clients?
Yeah, I love that question. And Brandon, I completely agree with what you said. In fact, I would take it one step further, because at Adobe, I'm selling these customer journey management solutions and trying to figure out which product makes the most sense for this use case, et cetera, et cetera. And what what I've really started to do, and I've seen this around the entire kind of Adobe ecosystem, is we've stripped away B2B and B2C. And we're really just looking at things from a B2E perspective, business to everyone. Because at the end of the day, if you're not building and executing those personalized campaigns, whether you're doing it to a B2B audience, for example, in healthcare, Adobe uses Aetna as our insurance policy. So, if Aetna's not doing an excellent job communicating with the Adobe HR or the Adobe benefits team, at the end of the day, me as the end consumer receiving those benefits are not going to have a very, good experience. So it doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C. Adobe has a solution that will best fit those specific use cases. We tend to think B2B, is best fit for Marketo. However, I have a myriad of healthcare customers that are doing B2C traditional campaigns through Marketo, and they're proving to be very successful. B2C tends to lean to be, high transactional, high volume, immediate kind of response. And we have a solution for that as well with Adobe Journey Optimizer. So one of the very big value adds with Adobe is that we have this better together story where we have true interoperability between the Adobe stack. So whether a marketer wants to run a true B2B campaign and focus on, in Brandon's case, possibly like the larger tech companies that are out there or communication companies, or if actually selling to the end user, Adobe has a best-in-class product to support that journey. It's just a matter of understanding exactly what the marketer's trying to do, who they're trying to target and segment, what data are they using, and how do we best make sure that those personalized experiences are truly being executed in near real time, so that the end user, whether that's somebody from the business or the end consumer, can have a really excellent experience, because at the end of the day, that's going to dictate basically their brand affinity towards that specific company.
And I love that. I mean, I think it's so critical to understand, to your point, Kalie, the importance of not only relevant messaging, but time-bound messaging and hitting that end user at the right time with the appropriate message and understanding why that's important to them, and also being able to have that capabilities. And I think that's what's been exciting to see. You mentioned it yourself, Kalie. Brandon's been, part of Marketo, myself as well, for quite some time. And being able to now be a part of the greater Adobe suite has been really exciting to see how these are starting to meld together. And to your earlier point, like a bigger picture of being able to say, hey, now that Marketo is part of the Adobe ecosystem, there's so much more out there for a marketer to be able to leverage or to utilize, and so many more levers that they can pull, because Marketo is part of the Adobe practice and the Adobe, under the Adobe wing, so to speak. And it's really exciting, from our perspective, from the Perficient side, to be able to see all these things starting to meld together. Things like Target, things like analytics, things like Marketo, things like campaign, all these things coming together and really enabling our marketing teams to be able to be truly successful where their customers are and being able to meet their customers' needs at that point. So it's really fun and exciting to see this journey with Marketo and Adobe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really why I love working here. We have a solution that's going to fit your desired campaign or experience. It's just a matter of delivering the right content at the right time to make sure that we're delivering, essentially delightful experiences for these end-to-end users. Because if we're not, it's not an expectation anymore. It's not a nice to have, should I say. It's not a nice to have to be able to do this. You have to do this as a marketer, or else you're going to be left behind, and you're going to be left behind really, really quickly, because a lot of companies are able to do this now, and it's just a matter of who's doing it best and who's doing it right.
Totally agree. Absolutely. It's no longer a nice to have. It's a necessity to be successful in this business. Couldn't echo that more. So with that in mind, you talk about having delightful experiences. I'm always interested in getting the perspective of, what about our internal experiences? What about our experiences as, marketing practitioners working within, within our own companies and trying to drive our own personal success through, our own understanding of what, the digital footprint looks like across those boards. Brandon, I keep beating this drum. I don't think, I know you've been working with Qualcomm for a long time, but you're not that old. You've seen the whole spectrum of, a big evolution within Qualcomm around, digital operations and, understanding the growth. So I'm curious, from your perspective, as you think about, digital operations and starting to get a bigger and bigger seat at the table, with marketing and operations and tech being intertwined now with, it's not just marketing is no longer just the whipping boy of sales. It's, starting to meld with IT. It's starting to meld with analytics. It's starting to meld with sales. And it's, we're trying to break down these different silos. How have you been able to take on, this monumental task of, melding all these teams together and really take this opportunity to continue to push and advance your own career in this digital operations space?
Great question. Lots to unpack there, but I love talking about this because it literally was the forest through the, instead of, I saw the forest through the trees moment. And as we've gone through this journey, and the first thing I'll say is I'm not on my own. I'm not on an island. It's the partnerships. Part of my tenure here has just been the fact that I've been here, a considerable amount of time that has made this move, helped this move, I should say. And that's the key component, having relationships with sales and building upon them, having relationships with IT, having relationships with sales operations, because at the end of the day, it's all, take one step at a time. We're not going to eat the elephant all at once in one giant gulp. So we've got to take the time to get to know the folks, understand the work, define the work, and then deliver. And am I the bullhorn for everything that's happening in this digital marketing operations world? No, not at all. But I am trying to move people forward, incrementally, one step at a time, and trying to also lower the technology. We have a lot of words. We use a lot of technical language. We can get to the weeds really quick. And so my whole position in the last few years, as we've started to really ramp up the evolution, is to lower the barrier and lower the, how do I get started, and start with just basic questions and start with, talking and working for better processes. I think when you start to drive leads, you start to show value. When you start to show value, lots more people show up. When lots more people show up, you have a whole new problem. And so now it's, how do we get the operations from a process perspective to adequately staff and adequately anticipate how much of this is going to lead to new work, and prove out that, it's, nothing is ever a bad thing. I get a lot of people that come in and say, well, what if this fails? I'm like, great, we learned something. And I think that's the approach you have to take is, it's fail fast and learn fast, because all of us are being asked to do more and go faster. And operations is key to that. Not just digital marketing operations, but operations as an entire organization. And so my experience has given me a lot of visibility into how this should evolve and how we can all kind of grab a hold and all pull at the same time. So that's been the funnest part for me, as we've, it's not a huge chunk of time that we're talking about. It's 5 or 6 years that we've gone from one way of working to this. And the old way didn't, not work. It was, a lot of people position it as like, hey, we're like the Marines, we're the last to know, first to go. And I'm like, yeah, for now, but that might change. And this digital transformation moment that we're in is changing that. And a lot more people are coming along for the ride. And that's the best part, because I could bore you to tears about the nerd talk in MarTech, but it's so much fun to talk about the results and the value extraction and the massive movements we've done to grow. Growth is one thing, but then, there's value in there too. And that's a beautiful story to tell. That it's kind of like the meshing of B2B to B2C. You really love to tell that story because it's, we're all buyers at the end of the day. We're all humans on the planet trying to, make our way through life. but yeah, it's fun, and I'm excited for the next chapter as we start to, expand, and we've landed some stuff, and now it's we're going to expand. So.
And so, Brandon, I'll put you on the spot here, just as you're thinking about, continuing to grow your digital operations team. One of the things that's been, really, it's been an honor to be working with you for so long, is to be able to see just your expansion of your own team. Really starting, sure, we're digital operations, but it was primarily focused on Marketo, and now you're continuing to expand more and more and interacting with more and more. What should a person in your shoes be thinking about as they're looking to, hey, we're going to have to take on a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, when they're looking at just from an execution perspective? We're all tempted to just take it. I've got broad shoulders, I can take it on. But what should they be thinking about when they're considering that, and they're seeing, like you said, move fast and break things, and then we'll fix it. What should we be keeping in mind?
Well, for anyone, I'm always very hypersensitive to everybody's workload. We're all slammed. We all have lives. We all have family. We all have things of that nature. But when it comes to the actual work, and learning fast and optimizing fast, it's nice for a slogan. In practice, it gets really tough, and so there is an opportunity there to establish priority and really focus on what's working and what's not. How much of your database are you touching on a consistent basis? How much should you invest in hygiene versus actual operations? It's all a balance here. And the priority for us comes back as, how do we automate the marketing, or, how do we automate the marketing automation? And, we're getting better and better every day. We're getting better at just diagnosing, do we need more people? Do we need better process? And so if I were not in my shoes, but thinking about somebody in my shoes, the first thing I would say is really hone in the process, and then work with the people to hone that process, so that you're not building the ultimate plan on an island, because you're going to be asking your peers and your longtime colleagues to jump in and say, hey, you've got to fill out this thing to get this thing that you want. We'll come back with reports and analysis, but we need you to put a little bit into this just as much as we're putting into it. So it's a partnership. It's also we're not trying to boil the ocean here, and I'm not trying to burn out every employee, because anybody that we burn out is knowledge loss. And so if I'm churning individuals out of our team, we lose a lot with that. And so it's a balance. Again, it's a balance that you have to make. What's priority one, what's priority two, and what's ad hoc and something that hits the backlog.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, definitely appreciate that insight. Kalie, curious, working under the the healthcare industry and so forth, what are you seeing from a digital operations growth path with your clients that you're working with, just from your perspective?
Yeah, just most recently, I was working with the second largest provider in the country, so one of their sister affiliates. And going back to Brandon's acronym from earlier, right, trying to get that baby to roll over. Truly, this was a newborn. They just got home from the hospital, and they did not know where to start. And they just hadn't been doing marketing automation before. Everything was extremely manual in their list uploads, and they really wanted to make this digital transformation. So they came to Adobe and they said, how do you guys suggest that we approach this? What should we be looking at first? How can we phase this out so it's digestible to us in a way that we can start showing success in, the first year, but also work towards really that maturity and growth that we would like to be at in the next 36 months. And the team came back, and a recommendation was, Marketo is a really good product to be your first solution to be looking at. And the reason being is because if we remember, prior to the acquisition of Adobe in the fall of 2018, Marketo was its own standalone marketing automation solution. And it has a lot of capabilities within it that are outside of just, email or SMS engagement. You can do things with landing page capabilities, website retargeting, create your own account-based marketing efforts, create simple to sophisticated lifecycle management journeys, all within Marketo, and really start to then look at the other Adobe solutions to add in for various efficiencies and value add. And so we put together this, this full 36-month growth path with Adobe and what that looks like. And really our priority number one was getting the ink signed for Marketo so we could start that initiative now. Second phase, really looking at, what is a RT-CDP look like? What does that real-time CDP look like? How can we start to look at your patient universe from a unified profile perspective, aggregate all of the disparate data sources that you have in, and start to really, kind of blow out your digital transformation from that end, from a real-time perspective, looking at that unified patient. But in order to do that, they need to be able to roll over, right? And that really was the Marketo product to help them do that. So again, just Adobe has so many solutions available, and Marketo is a really good number one to just start with.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's very exciting. And again, to go back to your example of just like being a part of the greater Adobe suite has really given Marketo an opportunity to expand its capabilities and abilities. Obviously, it's much more than just an email and SMS provider, but being able to be, part of that repertoire with Adobe has just been, exciting to see from everybody. I think everybody's perspective. And as it continues to evolve, it's going to get more and more exciting. So, all right, we've talked about kind of building up operations. We've talked about B2B. We've talked about B2C, blending the two and how we can evolve as marketers and get better and better each day and really focus on not only our own personal growth, but also our team's growth and how those potentially intertwine. But I'm really interested to get your guys' perspective, Brandon's perspectives and Kalie's perspective on where we see this going. Especially around B2B and what that next step looks like, and what as marketing practitioners we should start to be thinking about as we look future state around what the state of marketing is. And I'm interested, Brandon, from your perspective, when you think about that future planning and where you see your team fitting in with that, in the future state of marketing, if you will.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm going to leverage what Kalie just finished with, which was, hey, Marketo was a great place to start. And then how do you grow and land and expand on that? And I touched on that a little bit, but I think from our perspective, the creativity that's in this Snapdragon Insiders program is the beginnings of what I would say are the future of B2B marketing, which is to lean a little bit more into the B2C, universe and let the creativity drive. Because Qualcomm, for many years, we were an ingredient brand that was, the magic behind a lot of these things, the magic behind, cellular communications, the magic behind some of the most innovative products. And so we have a beautiful story to tell. And it's only through things like Snapdragon Insiders where we can bring along some people to become influencers and to take the next step with us as we go through this journey, to really put some roots into Snapdragon as a brand, but also just as part of the core of innovation within our space. And so that's been the biggest thing that I see is where the future's going for us, is that this creative medium, this sense of innovation, experimentation, it has so many parallels to what we do in MarTech and in marketing operations. It has so much to do with what we do as a company. And it's just an extremely exciting time for us to go on these journeys internally, but also what we get to tell externally and the things that we get to, expand upon with our regions and with, our different stakeholders, and even with our CEO and our CMO, and attaching ourselves to brands and going for the ride. And the ride is so much fun because I've been here a long time, and I've seen what, Qualcomm is, what's possible. And so the art of the possible is now becoming, front and center. And it's just this amazing time at Qualcomm to be doing what we're doing. And the future for us for B2B marketing is there's just so much to build on and to grow and innovate and get into the weeds and dig it all out. But it's things like Snapdragon Insiders that are going to make it a lot of fun to go on this journey.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes, really. And like you said, with anything, with these new innovations, it's all about the learnings behind it. The roller coaster of emotions with the ride. Sometimes it's thrilling, sometimes it's exciting, and sometimes it's somewhere in between. Sometimes it's straight up fearful. But at the end of the day, man, those goosebumps are pretty cool, and so it gets really exciting, especially as we look into the future. Kalie, really interested to get Adobe's perspective on where they see B2B marketing moving on in the future, as you mentioned, kind of the greater Adobe product, and just understanding Adobe's point of view on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes with, finding a solution. In this case, I think Marketo would be a really good fit to focus on as your first step, and then building that out. It's funny because I have a lot of conversations with customers where Adobe and the customer have very differing opinions as to what a CDP, customer data platform, really is. Right? Is it a data repository that just stores data from all of your disparate different data sources? Or is it truly something that's actionable that you can execute campaigns on? And that's Adobe's POV. So that's really kind of stepping up your digital transformation into kind of that next world. Taking in all of that data from, all over the place, creating that unified profile, and be able to actually set up campaigns where you're executing engagement off of them. That's what Adobe's POV is around, an RTCDP. How does that work with the Adobe Journey Optimizer? Where does Marketo fit into this stack? Oh, by the way, we really need very tangible, real, KPIs and some sort of dashboard that's going to tell us how successful we are. We have that with our customer journey analytics or our analytics product. So it's really just starting to build that out. There's no need to boil the ocean here. It takes a lot of manpower in order to do these things. I highly recommend, if you're looking to do like a full-phased approach, find a really great partner, somebody that has experience in this field. They hold hands with you. Perficient's done a fabulous job with working with me specifically in the healthcare space on a number of different customers that we work with, really just helping those customers move from, a level 1 maturity to really doing these more sophisticated customer journey that we would expect them to be doing within the healthcare space today.
And that's where the fun begins, right? I mean, nobody wants to just talk about data all the time. We want to start doing those highly engaged, highly, effective initiatives. But to your guys' point, that foundation is so critical, and making sure you've got that strong foundation to be able to build upon that and create those really robust, highly complex, personalized journeys to really drive your business forward. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, because at the core, it's you got to connect, you got to collaborate, you got to communicate, and you can't always lead with the marketing, the exciting stuff that you're in this device, or you're part of this experience, or hey, you're this all up for VR, AR, whatever it may be, experience. But you've got to go back to the basics, and like Kalie was saying, it's like, okay, you've got number one thing, Marketo, and then you want to unleash some of these new capabilities, and so they've got to make sense. It just can't be and it drives my OCD a little crazy that I've got to kind of put a period on every sentence within the stack. But it's true. You kind of have to have a plan, otherwise you will wake up in chaos.
You have to have a plan, and I think we would be terribly remiss if we didn't mention the need for digital transformation, digital activation, throw whatever acronym or ever buzzword you want to in there. What COVID has done to the need to build out a very strategic digital strategy. In healthcare specifically, we saw this, with the CDC. Marketo was working to make sure that we were getting the necessary, booster shots out there, and whether that was for Pfizer or Moderna. I mean, that's incredibly, important stuff. We were working with a remote regional hospital in the Midwest to make sure that they had a technology in place. Marketo was able to serve to be this technology to let the parent company that was 25 miles away, the parent hospital, hey, we don't have any ventilators right now, send these patients somewhere else. So we saw the need for our technology to really start serving a greater cause, which is really, really neat. But also, to the point of this conversation, COVID exponentially spearheaded the need for marketers to develop a very strategic digital activation strategy. And for those marketers that are not believing that, that is the way that in which the trends are showing, they will be obsolete in a matter of months.
Absolutely. Yep. It has been fascinating to see that exponential growth in that portion just in the last couple of years. So appreciate all of that insight, both of you guys. Well, all right. So I have done a lot of questions to Brandon and Kalie. I'm sure there's a lot of audience questions out there that are interested in hearing their perspective around these things. So I'm going to open up the chat, kind of take a look and see what we've got so far from a questions perspective, and we'll start going through them and get through as many as we can in these last several minutes. So let's see here. First question comes in. So opening up. So have you found that the sophisticated marketing practices being built out now are attractive for hiring people to join your team?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yes, it's also a balance. Not everything that's new and exciting is exciting for others. So you've got to bring the hiring, but you also have to bring the change management or the training that you need to go through internally to let people know, hey, this is what this thing does, and here's where we're going. Kind of the old Wayne Gretzky, we're skating to where the puck's going to be, not where it is right now. So yeah, it does help us in acquiring talent, but I will say that I think Kalie nailed it with talking about the pandemic and how things have changed. I will say that this talent pool is very, very sought after right now because of all these things that we just talked about. So you have to not only have the table set, you've got to take your time to make sure that the roles and the descriptions are defined properly, because you don't want to be hiring somebody that is really good at X and you're asking them to do Y. And you've got to have a lot of momentum behind organizing the work, talking about the ways we work, and opening up those partnerships that you've created as an individual to now a much larger team. And some of that is just building the right relationships and introducing folks and establishing those processes and the operations. But yeah, it's helped us to acquire the talent, but in this market, it's like wildfire. Everybody's moving in this direction. So it's challenging, but it's also fun.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very interesting to think about, what is attractive to, especially a potential new person, hey, we've got this cool life cycle and it works, and check this out. Look at all the cool things you're going to be able to do there, but also setting expectations there. All right, next question. So we've got tech versus culture. We find issues in breaking down silos. Excuse me. We find issues in breaking down silos culturally, even through possible tech. Any suggestions on breaking down those silos?
Yeah, I'll let Kalie jump in here, but I'll just say this one thing is if we lead with tech, it's going to be hard. You got to lead through traditional marketing approaches, audience segmentation, value propositions, content, organize the content. If you can organize the content, if you can write the story, and it's all storytelling at the end of the day, then that breaks down the barriers, and you can present a end-to-end story to sales and sales ops and to IT and to engineering, and that helps a ton. But I'm sure Kalie might have some other war stories here.
No, Brandon, I 100% agree with you. And even to bubble that up a little bit more high level, I would say that the organization as a whole has to have basically just an unwavering ability and leaning in here to say, yes, from a process management perspective, we want to make these changes. We understand that things might be a little bit difficult when we start to get into the nitty-gritty of what technologies we want to consolidate or what new technologies are needed. But the organization has to be willing to understand that some sort of process management changes are going to need to take place in order to be successful when the new technologies come into play. The implementations that I see that go the most successfully are for those, whether it's a hospital network or a huge healthcare payer, that whether they're IT, the sales team, the marketing team, they're all saying, yes, we understand that the direction is going this way in terms of digital activation. We're on board. We understand that, there might be hiccups. We understand that we're going to have to learn something new, which is very challenging, is to get people to be okay to learn a new tool, right? Get out of their comfort zone. And when we see that unity across the organization, that they're ready to truly make that digital transformation, if you will, that's the success stories that we see working the best across all of the different business units.
Awesome. So real quick, there's a few more questions. Keep them coming. Really appreciate it. We'll get through as many as we can. Before we dive into the next bigger chunk question, there was a question around what exactly Snapdragon Insiders is. Brandon, I'll take a quick stab at it to try and get the quick answer. It is the B2C campaign that Qualcomm is really trying to provide insight into influencers around a specific Snapdragon chip to be able to drive engagement around that piece. Brandon, fill in any gaps there.
Yeah, it's a community, and it's where we try to unveil events and activations that align to the Snapdragon brand, especially around our top tier features and capabilities that might not be in all devices, but it's a way for us to showcase our innovation and our ability to drive. And we do it through just creative activations and creative partnerships, from partnering with Best Buy or Amazon Music or other things that draw people in, but it does go back to some of the core things that we really hit on, and from an interest perspective of audio and music, sports and fitness, mobile photography, gaming, those are all things that we're trying to activate against, and it's got a much bigger strategy and plan and approach, but it's our B2C play, as Garett mentioned.
Yeah,
awesome.
And make a little plug here for Marketo. We have what's called the Marketo Marketing Nation, which is basically Marketo's huge community of whether it's all of our various partners. There's hundreds of different partners that Marketo has in terms of just being able to API into with or integrations with, but also more so for marketers to go into and say, here's an awesome idea I had around a thought starter, or I'm having this issue. Has anybody experienced this before? How did you find resolution? What are some workarounds? And from a community-based perspective, there are thousands and thousands of users, and it is super active. I'm actually quite surprised. Sometimes these community-based products tend to lose momentum, but from Marketo specifically, I'll go in there from time to time, and I'm just truly amazed to see, how many marketers are still using it as, for help, for, getting some brainstorming ideas, etc. So from its own, product perspective, that Marketo Marketing Nation has its own community as well.
And it's a fantastic community. I think we absolutely echo that statement. So next question, working with manufacturing industry and noticing that they're lagging behind in embracing some new softwares, specifically or softwares and digital marketing. What are some tips that you've seen in helping translate to the manufacturing customers?
Ooh, everybody says Qualcomm's different, and that we have a Qualcomm way. And a lot of that, we sit in a supplier side, and pushing on those types of things is always hard. Luckily, I've been blessed with the management that I've had that have always told me to, push the edges and paint outside the lines and go a little further. But when you're talking about manufacturing as a category, I think it's just a matter of, I think Kalie, nailed it earlier, and I'm just going to repeat what she said, is you either get on now or you're going to be left behind. And this may not be the whole reason that your business, continues to lag and fall and then become, the dinosaur under layers and layers of MarTech and operations or whatever. But the reality is that even if you just take one step and you improve 1% per day, it's exponential returns. And so even in the manufacturing sector, it may be hard to find where to invest. I can guarantee you that the value that you can get out of this type of approach, or this, this tooling and this, building out this portion of a team is going to pay itself back in droves. I've been on this path with Qualcomm for 17 years, and I don't think there's been a moment where I've ever questioned, am I doing the right thing? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I helping the company? It's always been yes, yes, and more yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we have time for one last question before we wrap. So that last question comes specifically to you, Brandon. So Brandon, you mentioned the importance of building bridges and networking with other groups within Qualcomm. What are some of the lessons you've learned to partner with Qualcomm sales operations, IT, finance, customer service, et cetera?
Good one. They all have their own little ways of working. And the first thing is something very basic. Reach out, even on a one-to-one basis, with somebody that you might, it's almost like a marketing operations approach, is you reach out one-to-one and you create this relationship. The hardest thing I had to do was I had to take off the white gloves, because I was giving a lot of white glove treatment to some of my regional sales managers and other folks, where I was teeing up the ball pretty high for lead management. And so getting them to lean in on to the next evolution of, hey, lead scoring models and revenue cycle models, and some of the underpinnings of what we do, was the hard part, or one of the harder parts. But I think it's just finding those key decision makers, or at least just partnering with folks that are willing to go along for the ride. And it's not so much of going along for the ride and I need you to like jump over 16 burning buildings and save the baby and do all this. It's like, just start the conversation. Luckily, when we brought on this tool, I had product management, I had sales ops, and I had sales in the room. And we went through a plan of, hey, here's phase one, and let's do phase one and see what comes out at the end. Let me experiment. Let's test and see. Our whole world in Qualcomm, we're a house of engineers that are pushing the boundaries of mobile technology, and everybody loves to experiment. Everybody likes to see, hey, let's turn this on and see what it does. And so that was the first step, and creating the partnerships after that was just a matter of, hey, framing it up correctly, making sure they understand the basics of what it's going to do and what it's not going to do. So just again, I overuse this analogy all the time, but it's one step at a time, and reach out to individuals and create those partnerships. And then I got a plug for Perficient and Garett. Reach out to some agencies, get some dollars, and have them pitch from their perspective of how they've helped other customers, because the proof is in the pudding of others, as they say, because they're able to say, we've been there, we've done that, we know this journey that you're going on, and you've taken the first step. Now let's take the second step, and let's see the value start to really light up.
Yep, I can't echo that more. And I think to wrap this all up for everybody, first off, thank you all for joining us today. Special shout out to Brandon and Kalie for your guys' insights. Certainly been very insightful for me. I'm sure it's just as insightful for everybody else joining. So thank you all again for joining. Thanks for AMA and Rebecca for taking and hosting this. And so I think it feels like to wrap it up, really, it's look, progress over perfection, right? Keep the needle moving forward. Don't get bogged down in trying to get to be perfect. Keep the progress moving forward, one step at a time. And I think there's a ton of encouragement there. And then measure those successes. And then also, I mean, one thing that I think we fail to do is we get moving so fast. Celebrate the wins, right? Be excited and celebrate the win, and engage with your team and celebrate the progress that you're making, as incremental as it is. As Brandon said, even if it's 1%, that 1% is exponentially going to continue to grow.
And that's And Garrett, that's something one of the new hires said is like, hey, you guys can't sit back and not take credit for the fact that your success has led to us actually getting hired. And I was like, he's not wrong. So good point.
Perfect. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Garrett, Brandon, and Kalie for that great discussion. Thank you once again, everyone out there, for joining us. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.